Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, a weekly podcast in which we get together and talk about things that we think we need to talk about and think about.
Important things.
Important things. My name's Ivanka Majic.
And my name's Michael Forrest. What are we talking about, though?
This week we're talking about libertarianism.
Libertarianism, very popular.
Very.
Growing in popularity at the moment, isn't it?
It does seem to be.
Makes me think about Ron Swanson on Parks and Recreation. That's my main reference point.
Yes, my main thing is Breaking Bad. Not particularly Walter White, but that guy that came to help him in the lab, the other scientist, he was a libertarian. And I do remember that his arrival on set causing me to actually Google what libertarianism was.
I see.
And then it made me go, ugh. Just lay my cards on the table at the beginning of this podcast.
Well, let's let this music play and then, How are you, Ivanka? Anything happened this week? Painful?
Yes, I have taken up running slightly more seriously than I have in previous incarnations of my running career, having read a book that tells you to run slowly, which seems to suit me. So I've really been enjoying
Sounded good.
the book. There was a book.
We're all excited that you've been enjoying it.
Yes, it does. So I went for a run. I live near the South Downs. Went for a beautiful run on the Downs. Was getting caught up in my technology because I was listening to a podcast and it ended, and then I was like, I wonder if Siri will be able to find me another podcast. And then I looked at my watch and put my foot in a rabbit hole and fell over with quite a crunch, and painfully enough to have to lie on the floor going, first of all, I'm not going to be able to get up, and then grunting a bit, doing some deep breaths and going, we need to get this pain out. And then I managed to limp to the road and phone Nick and go, I've twisted my ankle. And he said, do you want me to pick you up? And I said, no, I think I'll be fine. And then he went, it sounds like you want me to pick you up. I said, yes, I do want you to pick me up. So he came to pick me up, and I spent the whole day yesterday with my foot up with an ice pack wrapped round it. And I don't know.
This is why one should not exercise.
No, this is why one should pay attention in life and take care. Because then my first response was to be really angry. It was like, ow, that hurts. You idiot.
I don't like running along sort of country roads like that because they're so uneven. I get kind of nervous now. Whenever I'm on anything that isn't just quite level, I get quite nervous.
I was so cross with myself because it was so beautiful, because it was raining yesterday morning, and whilst everybody thinks sunny days are beautiful, obviously sunny days are beautiful, but rainy days can be beautiful too, especially on the South Downs with a view out to the sea. It was all very atmospheric, and I was running along thinking, how beautiful is this, what an interesting podcast I'm listening to. La la la. And as I've taught my daughter, even my daughter comes up to me and goes, Mummy, I hurt myself. Why? Because I wasn't being careful. So, I was definitely not being careful yesterday.
Balls. I hate that. Because then you're like, well, why am I? That was my exercise.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Now I'm going to be fat.
How am I going to lose all that fitness and all that positive? How long am I going to be able to not run for? This is going to ruin my fitness plans. And so I did phone my friend who is an osteopath and who has treated some famous sporting folk, and her suggestion was, knowing my character, that I should try and get an x-ray anyway, because she wouldn't put it past me to walk on a broken ankle. But I don't think it's, whilst it is pretty ugly and swollen and it doesn't feel very good at all, it's not super painful. I don't know if you can have not super painful and be broken.
Don't know. But yeah, sounds like
I also hit the arnica.
Arnica? Is that some nonsense from Whole Foods or something?
Yeah. I've got arnica gel, arnica pills, arnica and ice, and raising the thing. And I went to the doctors and I tried to get an x-ray. But For the first 3 days, it classes as an accident and you have to go to A&E. And I think A&E doesn't need me sitting there with my swollen ankle. I'm not urgent. So if it's still bad in 3 days, the doctor can write me a referral to a walk-in clinic.
Also, a swollen ankle in A&E isn't exactly going to get you put to the top of the urgent list. So you are going to be there for 12 hours.
So I think I'm better off at home with an ice pack on my ankle with it raised than I am sitting in A&E with my ankle not in ice, not raised, waiting 12 hours to be x-rayed.
That did sound like very good advice.
That was my logic.
It was just like, let's factor in that the queuing and waiting will have an impact on the care. So not just ignore that. That
was I deduced that all on my own. And then I went to the nurse practitioner and at my GP's, and she poked around and she was like, I think it would hurt more when I poked it if it was broken. But it's a reminder to be more mindful and shit like that.
Great, cool. Just what you needed.
Because that's what I needed.
I really needed a reminder.
I'm doing my best to channel this into a sort of a not, right, that's it now, I'm never going to be fit. My ankle's never going to get better. I'm never going to be able to run again. So I'm like, you can go paddleboarding.
There's alternatives. And you're by the sea, so, you can go in the sea.
Go swimming. I'll be in Croatia for a whole month, so I'll be able to swim every day.
There you go.
How was your week, Michael? How are you?
I shot some video yesterday. I shot a video for my friends. A very impressive mechanical modular music making machine up in Birmingham. I decided I wanted to kind of film interesting music artist friends of mine doing stuff, and I don't think I could have asked for better content, a better sort of more interesting stuff to film between so I don't know if you've...
I saw the Instagram.
Yeah, and I did. So yeah, people, a bit of background. I did do the mechanical techno video. If anyone's seen this mechanical techno demonstration, Graham and I did sort of 2 years ago-ish now, I think, but that's up to like 2.5 million views, and it properly went viral on that day. It was kind of trending on Reddit video. Oh wow! And all this stuff, and but we just made this thing that was. It was supposed to be like, have you seen that show, Look Around You? That's a sort of pastiche of those the videos you'd watch at school, like about science and things like that. No. So there'll be someone kind of drawing on a board and doing put the thing near the thing. But Look Around You it was Peter Serafinowicz, who, if you don't know him, he's got very good stuff on his YouTube of him doing a sort of camply voicing Donald Trump's speeches. Right. So there's a connection there, which is just sometimes the only way that you can bear to hear the words of Trump is via someone else putting a funnier voice on, a stupid voice on to kind of like, you're like, oh my God, but he's actually saying this as well. Yeah, but anyway, so we were sort of doing this kind of low key kind of, it was just sort of a pencil comes into the shot and points at a thing, and he demonstrated each thing. One at a time, and it was all very kind of, it was supposed to be funny, but in a very, very subtle way. But it just ended up going crazy, and we didn't really, it went around all the music electronic stuff straight away, but then it just kind of got wider and wider, and we discovered this ASMR community for the first time through that, which is audio sensory something stimulation, something or other, where people listen to sort of really quiet, like close to microphone sounds. So you sort of say, I'm going to crinkle some paper into the microphone now, and I'm going to simulate some ASMR for you now, listener. Bubble wrap. How does that make your hairs stand up, listener? Anyway, so I think we kind of ended up connecting with that world, and we recorded Foley. We'd kind of been careful with the sound, and even sort of the pencil is drawn across a record, and it sort of goes from sort of left to right. But we think that's what kind of got, because it's quite a slow video. But anyway, that kind of went viral, and so I've been we did another one since that, and then this one is a much more. But that machine was turntable records with like little pegs in them and things, and sort of like distorted so that they would trigger drum triggers and trigger like make a beater hit a cowbell and things like that, or make a synth play, or trigger a drum machine. So that was quite kind of an interesting looking project. But this new one is kind of order of magnitude of it's these large wooden boxes on like steel pipes and wheels with it, and there's sort of this huge drive shaft, and you push the wheeled boxes up against this drive shaft, and it makes a thing spin around, which one of them like pumps bellows, and then you plug in a sort of like an organ pipe into that, and it kind of blows through the organ pipe, and then another one's sort of like different cogs and cams that connect to. It's sort of geared up, and then that's got a drumstick on it, and it hits a different. And you sort of line up all your sort of physical drums against it, and it hits those drums. Weird little barrels and just lots of things spinning around, and it's sort of quite pretty as well, and it's very colourful. And we sort of got hold of this sort of warehouse-looking space. And we just spent yesterday just hell for leather shooting this, quite a few pages of script. We needed to get a lot of stuff, and it was me kind of manning 2 or 3 cameras, and then we had all the audio to record, and we had lots of things to demonstrate. But we got through it pretty well, but it was absolutely exhausting doing that. It's just you're kind of on your feet and just sort of like really kind of tense all day, because you can't really afford to make any mistake with kind of messing up the video recording or audio recording, because Sam Underwood has this crazy, he's got a workshop and then another studio he's got quite a lot of space, but he's like right out in the middle of nowhere. And like if we'd made any mistakes and had to do it again, it would have meant 2 hours just driving to get there and back, and loading it all up, and taking everything up these big stairs, and just it was a lot of pressure on that recording going well, because we weren't really going to get any do-overs. So you're kind of worried about batteries are running out, and things are flashing, and it's like this is acting up, and it's just quite intense. But I think we got everything we needed, and I've got to edit it now and kind of consolidate it all and bring it together, and hopefully we will have. The dream is we do even better than last time, but at the same time, I think it's probably, I think that just caught some weird kind of thing that we didn't even know anything about. So I'm sure this will go. I'm sure people will be interested in this, but we'll see how it goes.
Well,
but I've got a few days.
Even a couple of seconds on Instagram are quite fascinating and unlike anything else I've seen.
I don't know who else is doing anything like this. And the whole thing is, this thing can just kind of grow, and they've got a lot of ideas about it. But anyway, so it's an interesting project, and that's going to be my life for a few days. I was glad I had that project to do, just because I'm still having a bit of a depressing time I don't know, I'm in a sort of strange in between committing to, I'm not sure what I'm trying to do with my life at the moment, and it's been bringing me down a bit, just trying to just make sense of it, and still not really clear on what I want to do. But I always tell people the best way to get out of depression or feeling low is to do something for someone else and just focus on someone else's thing for a bit. So the morning that I was like, what am I going to do to get out of this slump? I was like, oh well, I could just go up to Birmingham, because I kind of start on that early and do some interviews with the guys, and kind of get rolling on that and just not think about my stuff at all. Shall we talk about libertarianism?
Yes, let's. Yes.
Go on then.
Let's talk. Shall I start talking about libertarianism?
Yeah, because it sounds like you've been reading about it and stuff.
Well, I've read a couple of things.
Yeah.
I've read a couple of things because I've had this wonderful golden opportunity of having to keep my leg raised and iced, which has enabled me to do a little bit of Googling around libertarianism. And so going back to what I originally, my point of reference for libertarianism, which is Breaking Bad. For those of you who don't know, it's about making drugs. Making and selling drugs. because libertarianism, obviously, with the word liberty at the beginning, comes from freedom, which sounds lovely, doesn't it?
Everyone seems to, freedom is an aspirational thing. Yeah. Certainly, we are very keen on getting our freedom.
Yes, we are. Freedom from the oppression of work.
Happening.
Yes, there is some building work happening in the background.
Freedom from loud outdoor building noises is not something we're currently enjoying. But listener, just
bear with
ignore
us.
it.
But it does sound really lovely, libertarianism. Freedom to do what you want and how you want it. Freedom to be prosperous. Freedom to be, I don't know, freedom. But it seems to be freedom to, and I'm going to put my judgment right up front here. It seems to be freedom to not give a stuff about anyone else or the consequences of your actions, both on individuals and on society and on the planet and on the world and on the universe. It's like, I can do what I want when I want. I want the freedom to just not care is how I interpret it. Any libertarians out there, happy to be challenged, but that's how I read it. In sort of free market terms, there's this expression which I always thought was a gentle, it's the laissez-faire, or however you pronounce the French, but it's basically freedom to just do. Which is quite interesting. So it's like to let it do or let it happen. So that all transactions, all sales, all production is done between individuals with no involvement from government or any organisation. So therefore no regulations, no restrictions, which is why some people have an objection to free movement of people as part of the EU, because it is a kind of neoliberal thing, though neoliberalism is a different topic. It's kind of a free-for-all. And then you've got this sort of absence of regulation, which even covers things like the fact that in America land, under the brave new banner of new politics, they're letting asbestos back into building work. The Environmental Protection Agency has lifted the ban on asbestos, even though it's proven to make people die horribly slowly.
Of cancer.
Yeah.
Actual cancer.
Actual cancer-causing substance, but let's not worry about it because someone wants to sell it, someone wants to buy it, let them do it.
So how did this come about?
I don't know.
Is it under Trump?
Of course, it's under Trump with his new non-environmentally aware Environmental Protection Agency people. He now gives jobs to people who are all about the money.
Elect me, get cancer.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And, you read about some of the libertarian I've found a couple of libertarian think tanks and, is strongly associated with conservatism, particularly because socialism has this association with that power should be given to government rather than, power and ownership should be to government as a representative of a community rather than to the individual. But I just find that, that all that's all very well. But it's, how can you rub along in society without, because it means no laws at its extreme. There's this funny article, like a satire in the New Yorker, which talks about the Libertarian Police Department. And, it opens with, I was shooting heroin and reading The Fountainhead in the front seat of my privately owned police cruiser when a call came in. I put a quarter in the radio to activate it. It was the chief. It's like everything's up for sale. Everything costs money. Everything is privately owned. You can shoot up heroin if you want to. That it's that sort of...
What I do in the privacy of my own home.
It's my business. And
it's the absolute disregard for the effects on anyone else, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's like, we've had a loft conversion in our house and we had to spend a lot of money putting in a sprinkler system to meet fire regs. And part of mine's like, what business is it of anybody's whether I die horribly in a fire? It's like, if I want to die horribly in a fire, that's my problem. And it's like, because it was that or put a wall in and create a fire escape. But But we wanted to keep the open plan nature of our home. But, you know, if my house did catch fire and I died or somebody staying in here died, there's nothing to say the house next door wouldn't also catch fire. And, that, you know, it's like you can't live in a... It is not...
You're not isolated.
You're not isolated. It's
so
impossible to be isolated. And maybe in the Wild West, when you galloped on your horses and raced really fast to put a claim in a piece of land and you had no neighbours for miles... A little bit of your life was quite isolated. So if you chose to carry a gun or shoot people, you know, but that was the Wild West. They were lawless. People were dying all the time.
That's why they call it the Wild West.
So
because it was scary.
It is scary. So the idea of, and you know, I've been thinking about it. If we do devolve into a truly libertarian society, I think I'll be all right.
Well,
I don't mind chucking some rocks at people. I don't know. It's just such.
Well, no, but it changes. It changes what your skill set needs to be to start to have to encapsulate things like subduing assailants on a regular basis, which isn't my idea of a society.
No.
Like, I would much rather delegate that to someone in a hat that kind of comes around when I call a telephone number.
Yep. Exactly.
Like, why do I have to do? Because it's sort of like that. Yeah, I could probably. Yeah, I could try and do everything myself. I could be self-sufficient. I mean, but then I wouldn't have time to do any, you know, you just spend your whole time just
doing everything.
Kind of surviving, wouldn't you? And so what, and where's the, I don't know, it's kind of on a certain level sort of lacks imagination, doesn't it? If that's, you know, you want to make your life about surviving instead of your life about
creating
doing something a little bit more, creating.
I think that's that's kind of and it's like if we, and you know, yes, you could level this argument at the EU that it's full of regulation and you do have to make sure that your medicine has been properly tested on human beings and is fit for consumption, that your food is fit for human consumption, and it constantly builds on what we know about what is healthy and what is good ways to prepare food, that we don't damage the environment too much, that using asbestos will cause cancer, that, you know, yes, but, and you could say, oh, well, but do we really need this level of health and safety on a thing? Haven't they gone crazy? It's, you know, political correctness gone mad. It's health and safety gone mad. But all he's trying to do is sort of document things, turn things into regulation and law as we learn that they're good.
But and then you get someone to. So Donald Trump is sort of, you know, is in favour of deregulation, but he's also sort of like anti-drug dealers.
Yeah.
But so obviously you want to draw the line somewhere. So can we? You know, you're not getting rid of the line. Unless you're going to say, okay, well, we'll just have open, you know, crack dealing in the streets because that's, you know, the nature of the direction that you want to go. But he obviously isn't going to go that far. So you've got to make a decision at what scale, and maybe stuff that gives you cancer is on the wrong side of that thing to kind of deregulate.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a genius to know that, to realise that. And how has the EPA managed? Obviously we grew up knowing that asbestos equals cancer. Didn't the people in the EPA grow up that way as well? How does this happen?
They're not going to get cancer.
Well, they're never going to go into one of these buildings that
I don't know.
Gives you cancer. Like, it's a mess. I think Berlin's quite a libertarian city. Like, I was often sort of a little bit annoyed at just how people. So, for example, like you go through the park in the summer, and it's just thick smoke. Because every 200 people are having a barbecue just wherever they feel like doing it. And you just go, what? This is just horrible because everyone's just doing whatever they want. And you sort of wish there were rules about, you know, not doing that. And there's areas in the city as well where it's just debris everywhere, and then like these tents, and everyone's just sort of like living in a tent, or you see people out on the river and they're just sort of doing, and I think a certain level of that's nice. Just like, okay, there's no one kind of telling you can't do this, but there's the fact that they smoke indoors still. was probably the worst one for me. Like, what is this? Like, why is this still happening? Like, just because you want to smoke, I have to now have my evening and clothes ruined. You know, I have to wash them again. It seemed kind of sort of selfish.
Yep.
And I get angry about libertarianism when it affects me in a negative way. And, you know, that's why we do have these rules, so that we're forced to think about these things. Even if in the moment I'm going to be like, oh, well, no, why are you telling me what I can do, what I can't do? It's because it affects other people and you might not have considered that. But
it's things like, so if you remove the rules, so I've always thought of Berlin as liberal, not libertarian, but so I don't know how to comment. It's like Brighton is a very liberal city, but I wouldn't say it's libertarian.
Well, I wouldn't have used the word libertarian, but then I was thinking about it, and I think there is a bit of that. Like, people just like, I'm just going to do whatever I want. I mean, I don't think there's people with guns walking around.
No, I think Brighton still's on the. I think there's some elements of liberalism or liberal thinking or open-minded thinking, like around, inclusion of different people in society, not excluding people of, because of sexual orientation, and drug consumption, drinking, that kind of stuff. That it's sort of liberal and open-minded to say, well, if it's not harming anyone else, but then, as we all know, the drugs trade harms many people. So, but my neuro-linguistic programming responds to the word, or certainly used to respond to the word libertarian with a sort of like open, like this is an open thing. It's about freedom. But with the sort of politics behind Brexit, the ambitions of it is to deregulate. So when you walk into a shop, at the moment, I can trust reasonably well that the food I am buying is safe and doesn't have any particularly, but there might be some chemicals in it that we haven't yet worked out if they're good for you or bad for you, and there might be some stuff in there that is potentially controversial, like genetically modified stuff that people aren't I don't personally, I'm not, but that's a different topic, but there's stuff, but you can make informed decisions. You can go, right, this is organic, this was a friendly farm, animal welfare friendly farm, this was this is cheap, this is this was packaged in England, this is flown from Peru. You can make some informed choices. Now, if we're going to have no regulation, what is there going to be to force food manufacturers and sellers of food to do anything other than go, try this, it's delicious? It's like, or even like the traffic light systems on food, this is really bad for you, but you're welcome to eat it. I'm happy with that. That's enough libertarianism for me. We have put loads of sugar in it. It's up to you. But even that potentially is libertarianism too far, because it does affect society. It costs us when people are really eating, unhealthy.
Yeah, it comes down to the short-termist thinking, or kind of like what your immediate perception is, and just kind of valuing that over learning and the body of knowledge and kind of the importance of society, and that like government isn't separate. I mean, it shouldn't be. Like government but I think in the same way that the government should be the people.
Yes.
Making decisions in the same. I think companies should be the people in the company, but obviously it sort of works a bit differently because the one person with the money to start it is the one that's kind of getting everything out the end of it. But I think we kind of want to rail against these things that seem external, but we need to see them as as us, and then it becomes a different thing. It's like, okay, well, another part of me did notice that something was carcinogenic.
The assumption is that all government or central control is bad. That is the assumption behind libertarianism, that having a degree of control over certain things or a degree of regulation, control itself has a very negative implication, but regulation just says, let's all agree that we're not going to put poison in food for human consumption. Okay, yeah, cool, right, we've all agreed, carry on. There is much wrong with government, but I think the principle of a government existing that is there to regulate against badness is not a negative one. I mean, there was a thing on the radio this week about a lot of paediatricians have got together trying to put pressure on the government to change their advertising regulations, because even though fast food aren't allowed to advertise on children's TV and children's channels, they can advertise on pre-watershed family programming, so on X Factor and all those kind of things. And so there's a pressure to say that all that advertising for fast food and junk food and all that needs to be pushed beyond family watching, so where really children are very unlikely to see it, because we need to protect them.
It's not just children seeing it either.
Well, no,
like,
but...
adults, like everyone. I
I
think
need
we got rid of smoking adverts. I think we should get rid of like freaking chocolate bar adverts as well at a certain point.
Have you watched that Hugh Fernley sorry Hugh, I can't, your surname won't go in my head. That thing on sugar, because he goes on about, it's quite interesting. You don't have to, it doesn't take ages to watch. But on the subject of the sugar industry and how it's pushed at us. Like when you walk into WH Smith's, can I have a newspaper? Do you want 3 chocolate bars for £1? No, I might have one, but 3 for £1. Yes, but I don't want 3.
Jeez. Giving out samples in shops is just, because when you eat something sugary, it then creates an aftertaste that can only be fixed by eating more of that stuff. So don't come at me with your little samplers of heroin and act like you're doing me a favour. Like, I hate that. No, thank you. Oh, but it's free. Is it, though? Have a taste of this ice cream. It's free. Is it, though? No, you're just trying to kind of break the seal on me just eating a bucket of ice cream. Thanks, you're so generous.
You're trying to make me fat.
Well, I want to talk about this gun ownership.
Right.
And just general weapon ownership, which is a big problem in the US. But actually, there is someone I know that has a gun collection, like crossbows and things like that. And this is someone that kind of puts on this sort of like macho thing and says, I've got my weapons. But what that is a display of is fear.
Yes.
It's like... but which comes from distrusting sort of authority, a distrust of government. Because if you distrust the police, then of course you've got to have a gun because they've got guns. But if you're living in that world of fear for your life, then, well, don't try and dress it up as some macho freedom thing. Be honest about it, which is you're scared of the government coming into your house and stealing your stuff, because that's what you're actually... And I don't know, it's to me, the things that gun owners think about themselves are actually, like, if you examine it, are completely kind of... What's
the opposite of their values.
They're just afraid of something that we're not afraid of.
So this thing about fear is that is kind of proven by science in a real article on the internet that I found and shared, which is that it is about fear. And so a situation that I might react to. So I am aware, because I'm a thinking, reading person, that all is not brilliant in the police force. There are people with prejudices, they have a terrible history of racism and all this kind of thing. What I am willing to say is that I want a police force, so how can I help make this police force better? What do we do? Yes, I can criticise it. Yes, I can share, like reading that Why I'm Not Talking to White People About Race Anymore thing. The book is, gives you plenty of examples of what's wrong with society, but it doesn't say let's throw it away. It doesn't say, right, let's all tool up and go for a fight, go and smash up the police station. It's like we need to move beyond this. This is a thing we've identified that's bad. Let's make it better, not let's put a tin hat on and get some guns. And it is a weird, you're totally right, that it's a really weird conflict of somehow these people that have got loads of guns look, want to be associated with as brave, macho people. And I think there's women and men in this, but it is seems to be a manly thing. But actually, they're showing how afraid they are all the time. And imagine how tiring life would be if you were that afraid all the time.
I suppose that the swagger comes from the fact that now you do feel like you can protect yourself, right? You do have the strength to protect yourself, which you didn't feel before. But there is a difference between those sort of like, you know, your Charlton Hestons who are like kind of flagrantly, you will never take my gun from me sort of thing, versus like, you know, an oppressed minority or oppressed kind of members of society kind of getting a gun because they're scared, but they're not allowed.
Yeah.
But so one gets to be called libertarianism and the other one just gets to be called crime. And is there a real difference? Not really. It's just about, but ironically, you know, the people whose fear is more justified are the ones that are going to then get thrown in prison for exercising their libertarianism by the people that don't really need that because they're already kind of fine.
Yeah.
You know, Charlton Heston, you're going to be fine. No one's coming to your house to murder you. Well, they might, I don't know.
But that's not your gun's unlikely to save you in that situation anyway. So I think this fear thing is, certainly applies to gun ownership for sure. And then I think you're right.
We've now got, I'm just going to say just for the listeners, it's now raining on my roof as well. So this episode is going to be you're going to have to just filter out some work sounds from Ivanka's side and some rain sounds from my side. I'm really sorry. There's nothing I can do about it, unfortunately.
Don't.
Just forgive us, and hopefully, 37 episodes before this have been pretty okay. So
just bear with us.
Give us this 1 week of just annoying sound. Whenever people do talk about this on podcasts, I can never hear the sound they're talking about. So maybe it's fine.
On the positive note, though, if it gets a bit heavier, the rain here, it will stop the roofers.
If someone has an exceptionally kind of strong moral core, so this is the Ron Swanson character on Parks and Recreation. He sort of gets away with his libertarian ideals by having an exceptionally sort of solid moral core where he would never hurt anyone, he would never do a bad thing, and he's impatient with how inefficient government is. He is utterly protective of his privacy. He's utterly sort of like, gun owning, hunting. He will do what he wants, but we forgive him because he has this unshakable moral core. Now, how many real life libertarians could you really say that about? I don't know. I'm sure they'd all like to think of themselves like that, but when push comes to shove, you're probably killing people that you should by mistake before you're doing anything to protect yourself.
I think the key thing is this, and I think we do need to do the episode on capitalism, because the key thing in this libertarianism, I think, is this pursuit of wealth. There's this pursuit of prosperity, which means that, and this is where we go back again to, I think, to the super rich, our favourites, because there's a couple of things within that. There's one, why can't you have a company that is profitable but doesn't damage the planet, for example, or is kind to its employees, or is considerate of the town that it's in, or is that extra 3%, 5%, 10% profit really worth, or even 50% profit, or 20, what's the number that's worth pursuing so much that the impact on the environment, society, people, your employees is worth it? So
how much more important are your needs really than everyone else's?
And beyond a certain level, how much more money do you need to make? Why is this pursuit of money so important to you that you're willing to sacrifice all these other things, not just for yourself, but for all of us? Because your power is so great. Like an Amazon, a Google, an Apple, all these big companies have so much power over us. I was saying that, yes, there's things with the police force, but let's address them. The thing about climate change and the state of the planet and pollution that's really freaking me out, and there's no other expression for it, is that we're past a point of no return now with climate change. And we are still, and I say we, because, and by that I mean the whole world in one. I know I personally, I'm not blatantly going around, but I'll put myself in the mix. And I read a Naomi Klein article, which was quite interesting on this topic. But we're just like the teenagers at the party going, yeah, I feel really dizzy and really sick, but I'm going to have another beer because, you know, and it's just, there's a point at which I think we have to have central regulation that says, I'm sorry, you can be as rich as you like within the confines of not destroying the planet. That's got to be the minimum, surely.
My response initially to what you're saying is that you've got to make more money because you're keeping score and you want to win. But so that's why it's interesting to me that Ron Swanson is very secretive about, he has a mysterious amount of wealth. Like he's not even necessarily sure how much gold he has buried around the place, which is, you know, that sort of privacy about and being really protective about how much you have is a bit different to that sort of capitalist, that competitive sort of, I've got to make money because there's no other way of proving to my dad that I'm okay. But yeah, money equaling freedom, I suppose. But do you think like that privacy is a core part of libertarianism, or is that?
I think I was thinking about privacy and how, because off the back of our blockchain conversation, because I struggled with that a bit now, no longer because I'm ignorant, but rather because I'm not sure, I'm not excited by it. I haven't yet. Maybe in a couple of weeks I'll come up with some amazing application for it. But in the meantime, it's made me think about that decentralization, the lack of regulation, and then privacy comes up to it. And as an amusing side note, living in a failing Yugoslavia in the late 80s, the whole population accepted that their phones were being tapped. It was like, you know, you'd make a phone call and you'd hear this click and an echo and you'd be like, all right, hello. Obviously never got a response. And it was kind of just an accepted thing that, of course, the government would be monitoring and intercepting post and post would disappear and your phone line was a bit wonky and all this kind of stuff.
I've always kind of assumed that someone's probably listening, though, when I use anything like that. I don't write certain types of stuff on Facebook Messenger.
And to some extent, I think some of this new regulation where basically everyone has to save all the data because the government may one day want to read all your whatever you've done, that's a step too far. I think they should at least have to make the effort of planting a bug in your house or intercepting your post or whatever. You know, I think I should be able to destroy my secret notes, but again, I personally, I don't really know where the line is. So I am quite a private person, despite my sort of podcast, for example, and a few other. But it's like, I'm not entirely sure where the line needs to be. Because it seems like medical records But, you know, if you've got lots of people's medical records, that data can be very useful for advancing medicine. Well,
it comes down to trust, doesn't it? It comes down to how much you trust the people with it, how levels of trust versus fear, I really think is the core of this. And the distrust leads to, okay, well, if I can't trust anyone, like if I can't trust institutions, then I can only trust myself. It doesn't lead to a coherent society.
No. And I think that's the point, the coherent society. I mean, even manners. So there's extra special drilling going on right now. Cool. Even manners, they're no longer a centrally controlled construct, but they're kind of a regulation that says, you know, make eye contact, nod your head, morning, excuse me, thank you, please, may I? You know, that sort of like, let's stand in a queue. These are all things that if we didn't, every shop would look like a Black Friday video from America. You know, people like trampling over each other to buy cheap shit that they don't need. You know, it's like these conventions exist to make everybody's life more tolerable, more coherent. I mean, I don't see that as a bad thing, personally.
When something isn't immediately apparent to you, you have to just accept that someone else knows better than you, or that the rules are there for a reason. But I suppose the more we learn about the world, the more it becomes exposed, the harder it is to just accept that, that things are being done in our best interests at all times. So I guess it's sort of like a backlash to, it's like instead of trying to become part of the institutions, it's, okay, well, I'm just going to rail against the institutions because they have been proven time and time again to be untrustworthy. You want to bring libertarians back to, society. And the only way to do that is to rebuild trust in institutions, or in the fact that they will have a voice in the institutions, in the state. And so, this trust building thing is hard. But that's the only way to come back from this. Or you just try and force gun regulation, you try and force people to do things, but that's just going to make them fight even harder.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about all these things as though government does have everybody's best interests at heart, and they do look after everybody. There's some assumptions, like I've used the racism in the police force that may or may not be on the wane. I've got no statistics for today, but before anyone picks on me, but but there is this thing, like especially at the moment in this country, and why libertarian philosophy might be more easily gaining traction is because the government has not been doing a very good job of looking after its most vulnerable. We've got all these local councils going bust and declaring that they can only afford to provide the minimum mandated things. So, and your council does all your bin collection and your road repairs and your, if that all starts going to shit, we will be descending into a Wild West libertarian society where the towns that have money and bother to club together to fix these things will, and the ones that don't won't. But never mind, we will be free of regulation.
Yeah, and people need to connect the fact that if you vote for promises, benefits for the very unlikely case that you will be fabulously rich or something, that if you vote wrong,
then that's what you get.
If you vote against your best interests, which you are doing, if you're kind of voting for people that want to not look after you when you need it, then you're going to end up with them not being able to do their job, and then you're going to not trust them to do their job, and then how do you connect that back to the fact that, well, maybe I shouldn't have
voted for these
let
people,
this person in?
Yeah.
Choose better leaders or stockpile cans of beans and guns. I mean, I know which one I'd rather have. So it's up to you. Like, I
think it's this basic. So there's lots of articles around the moment about democracy's broken and it doesn't work. I think democracy requires the active participation of its citizens, and if there's no active participation in the process, and people don't vote, or they don't inform themselves before they vote, or they don't have, then democracy doesn't work.
But what I've realised from talking to you every week about stuff is, you only get a vote every so often, but the person who has been elected still has to listen to you, to anything you have to say. So your opportunity to influence things does not begin and end at voting. And whether or not you voted, you can still email, you can still tweet at people who aren't doing a good job and affect things. They have to take it into account. And that's something, it's not just this kind of binary once every 5 years thing. It doesn't have to be that way. So participation isn't just like voting and trying to figure out who to vote for. Not that I've done this, but it's something that I didn't realise, and I'm 40, it doesn't just begin and end at voting, which it's too much pressure on that thing, if you're not sure and if you kind of think they're all the same. But you can still, communicate with the people and give them ideas and make them aware of, force them to empathise with you. And the more people that are doing that, that will improve democracy.
It will, yes. You have to go. You can go and talk to your local MP, and you can. I mean, my family we're quite good at that.
Well, it's
Hi.
usually
Me again.
it's usually sort of like people. It tends to be associated with crazy people in the people in the community crazy enough to turn up to the local government meetings and try and say something. So yeah, it's just sort of immediately like ignored. But if you're smart and you make a good point, I feel like there's opportunities.
I think
influence things.
I think that's one of I don't know. In all of this, like, I have moments of optimism, like in the way that, you know, Boris Johnson this week, I think he's hoping to swerve any repercussions from his Telegraph article. He published an article where he talked about women who wear the burqa. It was just school playgroundy behaviour, frankly, from somebody who allegedly has aspirations to be our Prime Minister. One thing that gives me optimism is the fact that perhaps Boris Johnson will not be able to hide, because the population can put a lot of pressure on the visible pressure, noisy pressure on the Conservative Party to deal with him. A Tory peer woman who's a Muslim, she said that he's basically, she called it, apparently it's a thing, dog whistling to right-wing extremists, because he's kind of, you know, throwing in a little jive that's not super, you know, it's unacceptable, but it's not massively offensive. Well,
there's a lot of that going
anyway,
on
it's
as
not
well.
like, anyway, I don't know how to phrase that, how to describe it, but it's kind of printable in the press. It's not hate speech, so it's not a crime, but it's enough to go, shh, I'm in your gang, hi, follow me. And, you know, that's what's terrifying about it. You know, that's that sort of I want to be leader at all costs. Blech. Thanks for listening to the podcast, everybody. If you like it, then please get in touch and tell us. More importantly, tell your friends so they too can enjoy the wondrous podcast that is the Grand Podcast.
Now that we have, well, nearly 40 episodes, you can maybe recommend your favourite one to them so that they don't have to try and figure one out. I still imagine people going, these subjects all seem like a lot of effort to listen to. But just reassure them that it's fine. It's good. It's fun. It's not homework. It's just fun to listen to. You can find us at grandpodcast.com, and our email address is hello@grandpodcast.com. But where can people find you individually?
You can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
You can find my website, my main website, michaelforrestmusic.com. And just click on our website, subscribe, click that button. It's good. And we'll see you next time.
Bye. 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 Bye.
Bye.